Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of the P.W.P Sessions podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Figueroa. Tonight's guest has been a previous guest on my podcast, poet and author Terry E. Carter. Glad to have him back for another awesome conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Now, for those of you not already familiar with this podcast, the P.W.P Sessions, or the Poets for Purpose Sessions podcast, is a podcast that I created where I interview new or established authors of poetry, rappers, or MCs, and I feature a performance of their work along with an audience Q&A session. I am your host, Noelle Figueroa. I am a poet, author, blogger, workshop facilitator, and event host, and I am the creator of the P.W.P Sessions podcast. Tonight's guest is returning for another episode, Mr. Terry E. Carter, and this is his bio. Terry E. Carter is a gifted writer and speaker. Terry is also a classically trained poet whose literary influences range from Shakespeare to the Harlem Renaissance. Terry is a husband, a father, and an ordained deacon and arts minister. He enjoys taking contemporary life and faith experiences and translating them into word pictures that engage people in a truly unique way. His insightful lyricism cuts directly into the heart of problems of spirituality, race, culture, and social justice. He has published 6 volumes of inspired poetry, including the newly released Brown Skin and the Brilliant Sun, a poet's opus. Terry is a cancer survivor and has an amazing testimony about his family's many trials with that dreaded disease. He just finished serving a 2-year appointment as Medford, Massachusetts inaugural poet laureate. Terry is married to Teresa J. Carter, and the Randolph M.A. couple has an adult daughter, Maya N. Carter, currently pursuing a theater career in Brooklyn, New York City. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is Mr. Terry E. Carter. Hey, Terry, welcome back to the show. Good evening. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Neil, and thanks for having me again. I was hoping that I hadn't done it so bad the first couple of times that you wouldn't say, "Come on back."
Nah, you were definitely on point, and I thank you for being my guest previously, and I'm glad to have you back. I'm excited about this conversation because of your latest release. First of all, congratulations on your sixth book, if I'm not mistaken, right? Why don't we just get right into it? What was the motivation or inspiration behind this latest project?
Well, it's funny because I started this thing without any intention of writing like a series of books, but the first Brown Skin and the Bread of Life, which was done in 2010, it just, folks were telling me, well, you know what? When you write another book, why don't you keep this brown skin thing going? I like it. So, 6 books later, we're into Brown Skin and the Brilliant Sun. I've got one more planned, and then I'm going to do something different.
Okay, excellent. That's awesome. Now I'm going to share my screen again for just a quick second, because what I want to do is I want to pull up your website just to show our audience, for those that may not already be familiar with your work, your general collection of poetry. You started out in 2010 with Brown Skin and the Bread of Life, then Brown Skin and the Beautiful Faith, followed by Brown Skin and the Brand New Day, a poet's renaissance, Brown Skin and the Burden of Proof, a poet's revelation, Brown Skin and the Brave New World, and now your current release, Brown Skin and the Brilliant Sun, a poet's opus. And these can all be found on Terry's website, brownskinpoet.net.
Thank you.
Excellent. So what exactly does this collection of poetry consist of that makes it stand out from your previous work?
It's funny, Noah. I think that I've gotten to that, that place of kind of literary maturity where I know my style. I know how I like to write. I know where I like to take people in terms of the stories that I'm trying to tell. So it's a journey. It's a journey, but there are arrivals from time to time at different levels, and I think I've arrived at a level that's pretty satisfying in this book.
Mhm, mhm. Now, what would be the subjects that you tackle with this poetry collection?
We go everywhere. As I've tried to do in all of my other books. We deal with race, we deal with social justice, we deal with history and legacy, we deal with family, we deal with addiction and crisis, we deal with violence, and we deal with faith and spirituality in a number of different ways. So, and then we deal with just contemporary topics that just kind of pop up. We dealt with COVID-19 and all kinds of things that have been in the news. So, we try and go where, kind of go where the stories lead us to go.
Mhm. Right, absolutely, absolutely. Now, can you take us on the journey of exactly how you put this project together from start to finish? Like when you got the idea
Mhm.
to actually do this particular book, like what was that process like for you?
Well, the last book that I wrote, the fifth book that I wrote, was an anthology. So what I did is I took poems from each of my first four books, and I set aside a chapter for each of those works. And then the second half of the book was kind of stuff that was all new to that particular book.
Mhm.
And even as I was finishing that book, it was in the publishing stages, I was still writing, and stuff was still coming to me, but I couldn't get them into that book. So the idea of a sixth book, seemed natural. Like I said, I, kind of planned to do six. And the title came to me, and the poetry just kind of came to flood. But it took me a lot longer to write this one than it took me to write any of the others. I really, really took my time, because I eliminated a lot of stuff that came to me fast but didn't last. Say like that.
Right, right. Like, and how did you decide like what poems to keep and what poems to get rid of? Like not
Well,
to,
I went in on it. And it ended up being, I think there's close to 100 poems. It's a thick book. It's
Mhm.
definitely the beefiest book I've written so far. So the things that I eliminated on a couple of different planes. I eliminated some based on, they weren't finished, and I didn't want to take the time to really go in and finish them. So there's a bunch of stuff that's on the shelf that I got to go back to and I got to clean up and finish. But also they just kind of fell outside of the realm of the themes that I was exploring. So I said, well, I can get back at them, and maybe when I get to book 7, I'll have smoothed them out so I can fit them in. So the poems that I chose are poems I really, really wanted to have in the book.
All right, excellent, excellent. And let's dive into the subject matter. Now, you mentioned what those subjects were, but can you elaborate on like why you chose those particular topics to write about?
Yeah, dealing with a lot of different things going on in my old neighborhood, West Medford, Massachusetts. So a lot of a number of the pieces that I wrote were pieces that I wrote about people that were experiencing difficulties, some sickness, some death, some tragedies in different instances, dealing with my own mortality, as I think I told you, some time ago, I'm a cancer survivor,
Mhm.
but I lost both my parents and I lost my baby brother to cancer, all within the last, probably, 8 or 9 years. So, needed to deal with that. Needed to deal with what I refer to as, in one poem, is called evangelical fraud. There's a lot of bad practices going on in the Christian world,
Right.
in Christian leadership, and I needed to deal with it. So this I wrote this longer piece that is it's a fairly scathing indictment of folks who are just in it for the dime, folks who are not in Christianity, who are not in preaching, who are not in, evangelism, to bring people to God and to disciple people. They're in it because there's, they think that there's a fast buck to be made.
Right.
So I dealt with a lot of that. And just, history, legacy. I just, there are things that, kind of eating at my spirit that I needed to deal with. And as you well know, Neil, this is how we get our emotions dealt with. Right now, poetry is how we get our emotions dealt with. I found it to be the best way for me to articulate my private rage. So, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And I've been working with a couple of fellas, playing music behind my poetry. We call ourselves the Ally Project. They're three white guys, fabulous jazz musicians. One of whom came to me and said, "Listen, I want to do something that's kind of an intersection of jazz and social justice. What do you think?" And we've got a CD coming out. Hopefully, we'll have it. It looks now like we're not going to have it before Christmas, but we'll have it shortly thereafter. And it's called the Ally Project. And so some of the poetry is poetry that I wrote for the Ally Project. But I have to make sure that whatever I write, it stands on its own in terms of a piece of literature, so that it can be read as well as spoken, or in this case, used as a backdrop or front drop to a jazz composition.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations on that. That's
Thank you.
excellent news. That's excellent news. Looking forward to that. Now, now for this particular project, what has been the reception or response to it? Like, what have people been saying to you about it?
I had a lot of people that were really waiting for this book, and so far I've gotten pretty strong reception to it. I did a release party a little while back, and folks who came out were really enthusiastic. And then I had another feature that I did a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, and nice audience turnout, nice, just good things happening. Critical review. A couple of folks have promised that they would write Amazon reviews. I haven't seen any yet, but hopefully that's going to start happening as well. I'm not really a crazy fan of Amazon. I think that their practice is, kind of shady in some instances. But I know that if you don't do it, it diminishes your chance of kind of growing your audience. But I like driving folks to my website if at all possible, because I buy a lot of inventory, and I like to sell, as we like to say, out of the back of the car, the stuff that fell off the truck.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now refresh my memory, and also for those that may be viewing this interview for the first time and experiencing you for the first time, do you consider yourself to be a self-published author?
Well, all my last 5 books have all been self-published. So yes, the first book was published in a more traditional way,
Right.
selected and published without me incurring any costs. But it didn't really turn out well. I mean, the book sold well, and it was nicely done. But they were a shady organization. I ended up having to buy my rights back from them. And I'm actually, one of the things that I hope to do early next year is to republish that book as a new edition with a different publisher.
Excellent. And what would you say that your experience has been overall with self-publishing? Like, what has that felt like for you to have control of how you present your work and distribute?
It is good. It's a great question, Noel. It's you just got to do the work. You can pay for a lot of things. You can pay for all kinds of promotions, and being at book fairs, and them featuring you in different catalogs and trying to put you in all these different bookstores. But I'm a local cat. If I don't go worldwide, I ain't trying to be Jay-Z or anything like that.
Right,
I have some people that I need to write for, and they buy my books. So I do the work that I need to do, but I'm not trying to kill myself for this thing.
right,
You
right.
know, you know, people talk about dying for their art. That's crazy.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I believe in sacrifice. Don't get me wrong, but I ain't cutting off no ears.
Right, exactly, exactly. I feel you. I'm all for being passionate too, but you got
Yeah,
to have your boundaries at the same time.
yeah. And, and
Right,
and then I have friends like you, obviously, um who have opened up a totally different window of opportunity, and I belong to a couple of different author groups and such, and so it's nice. I belong to a group of Black poet laureates, and we published an anthology not too long ago, and I've got work in that anthology, 22 different poet laureates from across the country. So you can do things. You can do things, but you just got to work and you got to seek it out if you want it.
absolutely, absolutely. Now let's talk about your experience as a poet laureate. First off, congratulations on your tenure as
Thank you.
poet laureate. So that's an awesome accomplishment, and I'm very inspired by that achievement. Um, was that something? Was that something that was a goal for you?
Um, I think it was in some ways because the city where I'm from, Medford, Massachusetts, there's cities on three sides of there. I don't live there anymore. I work there and I'm there a bunch because I got family there, but I
Mhm,
actually live, on the other side of Boston.
mhm,
Um, but you know, people, a couple of folks that I knew in there's a city adjacent city called Arlington, there's an adjacent city called Somerville, both of which had poet laureates for some years. And they said, man, you could do this in Medford. You could do this in Medford. And ultimately the conversation came about. Some folks in the mayor's office got together and decided that they'd like to do it. I talked with them a little bit, just on the front end, and then when the announcement finally came out that they were going to, have a poet laureate, I applied, as did several other really talented poets in Greater Medford.
mhm.
And fortunately for me, I was the one that got selected. And it was a good experience. They didn't have a blueprint, Noel. They didn't have a plan. So most of what I did, I initiated, and then I responded to requests from the city, for various things, poetry for Pride Month, poetry for Juneteenth, poetry for inaugural ceremonies, poetry for social justice convenings, poetry for a number of different things that happened in the city. So Martin Luther King Jr. So I try to be available, and I think as it said sometimes in the sports world, the greatest ability is availability. So I tried
Right,
to be available.
right, absolutely, absolutely. Now, for those not familiar, um, can you share exactly what a poet laureate is
Yeah.
and what the responsibilities of a poet laureate
Yeah,
is?
I mean, it can vary pretty dramatically, and it happens at different levels. Like there are state poet laureates,
Mhm.
then there are city poet laureates, county poet laureates. So it really, it really can vary from place to place. But the sum total of it is that the poet laureate is the chief uh, poetry advocate in a given area, whether it's the city, the county, the state. That person is the one who is responsible for sharing as much poetry in the art community, as an adjunct to the arts community as possible. Because what happens in a lot of instances, even in communities that consider themselves very artsy, sometimes poetry and spoken word kind of it's not at the forefront like visual arts and photography and dance and music are. So the part of responsibility of poet laureate is to make sure that poetry shares some of that artistic platform.
Right, definitely, definitely. And during your tenure as poet laureate, what was the response to your tenure like? You know, like what were people's reactions or responses to your role?
I think the thing that has been, kind of most complimentary, and the new poet laureate is a lovely person. We've worked together. I like her. She's highly talented. But a lot of people have, in all honesty, have come to me and said, listen, man, I wish they had been willing to extend your term, or I wish they had been willing to let you re-up. We really miss, kind of the diversity, the voice, the presence that you have, kind of in the arts community. So I'm still working in the arts community. I don't have the official title anymore, but a lot of those folks, because I was the inaugural poet laureate of Medford, consider me a poet laureate emeritus. They've given me that unofficial title. So, I'm working with her. I'll work with the poet laureate that comes, after she does. As long as I'm around and available, I'm happy to be, I'm happy to be functional in the area.
All right, definitely. And how did it feel for you, like overall, like in terms of you sharing your poetry, and you had your tenure as a poet laureate, like how did you feel being able to represent yourself and you're representing your art in your totality? What did that feel like for you?
It's an honor, there's no doubt about it, and it's a point of pride with me, hopefully not vain pride or, a selfish pride, but, it was not only an honor, but it also extended, kind of the legacy of, my art in that particular community, in that particular city. And it got, I'll be honest with you, it got me play in, pretty much all of the surrounding cities. I got called to do different things. I, became the subject of a huge mural. I got to do poetry for peace gardens, COVID memorials, outside of my city. So it worked for me. I mean, it worked for me. It certainly gave me a cachet that I with people that I didn't have before, simply because of the title of being poet laureate. I got calls to come do stuff because people had heard that I was the poet laureate in Medford.
Right, excellent. Now, in terms of writers of color, African American poets or poets of color in general,
Yeah.
do you feel like in terms of where you live, like, or in Boston, or your neighborhood, or the area where you reside, do you feel poets of color are being represented fairly, or do you feel there's still some work in that area in terms of proper representation?
I definitely think there's work to do, definitely in terms of diversity and in terms of, kind of, strength in numbers and so forth. But Boston's current poet laureate, is a woman of color, very talented. Massachusetts, believe it or not, one of the states that considers itself super literate, Harvard and so forth, does not have a state poet laureate. So one of the things that I've been doing, I'm talking to a couple of our state reps, and is kind of trying to get them to, to see that, one, that there's high value in it, and two, that that it doesn't look good. It doesn't present a complete picture of what Massachusetts is, as an arts state. And it is an art state. It has one of the finest museums in the country, in the Museum of Fine Arts. Has one of the best musical schools in the country at Berkeley School of Music, New England Conservatory. I could go. The list goes on and on and on of what Boston is, as an art state. So to not have a poet laureate at the state level, it doesn't fly for me. So, and in all honesty, maybe I'm somewhat selfishly motivated. I'd love to be the poet laureate in Massachusetts. So, you work, you have as many conversations, you be as great an advocate, hopefully not in a self-serving way as you can. And maybe at some point in time they take the hint and go on ahead and do something.
All right, definitely. Now, hypothetically speaking, like if you could collaborate with any poet, living or deceased,
Wow.
who would it be and why?
Well, the way that I came into poetry was through a high school teacher, white lady, Greek, very, very nice, extremely kind and compassionate, a wonderful teacher. And she gave me a small volume of Langston Hughes' poetry.
Mm.
And that's how I was introduced to any kind of a pantheon of Black poets, because I went on to, kind of figure out what this Harlem Renaissance thing was, and, Anna Bontemps and Countee Cullen and Jean Toomer and Claude McKay and so on and so forth. And kind of, I wanted to kind of measure myself in that regard. So I tried to study classically as well as culturally, to show myself approved, as a quality poet, quality written poet. And then I also wanted to, kind of be able to perform, but I don't necessarily consider myself a spoken word artist. I don't spit, quote unquote, off the top of the dome. In some pieces, I do consider myself as having bars,
Right,
but
right.
more in the sense of being a poet with good rhythm and good cadence, and and able to present in a way that I feel is appropriate for the kind of writing that I do. So
Right. Definitely,
but
definitely.
Langston Hughes, probably, it'd be lovely to have a conversation with him. It'd be lovely to have a conversation with Maya Angelou. It'd be lovely to, collaborate with a Sonia Sanchez. There's so many wonderful poets of color, but I also really, really like, I like some of the classic American poets. I mean, I like Carl Sandburg. I like Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman. There's a lot of stuff that I'm really, really very fond of. So that's not necessarily African American poetry, Native American poetry, Caribbean poetry. There's a lot of really, really good stuff out there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you mentioned Langston Hughes. That was, pretty much one of my main inspirations as well for getting into poetry.
Yeah.
So I feel you on that. And that, in fact, provides the perfect segue to our next segment, because now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Terry to take the mic. So at this time, Terry, you are welcome to read up to 5 poems. I definitely would like to hear some pieces from your latest release. So at this time, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noah. So I want to start with this piece. It's called Black Seeds. And the title actually came from a piece of music done by a old school R&B group called The Main Ingredient, and they had this song called Black Seeds Keep on Rolling. But so this is Black Seeds. Part of the problem is that many of you can only take this black thing in very small doses. You don't want no protesting, no addressing, and no investing. You need that Aunt Jemima black, that Uncle Ben's black, that Step and Fetch It black, that Clarence Thomas black, that Booker T black, that In Denial black, versus that unapologetically black. You kind of thrown by that Nina Simone black, by that James Baldwin black, by that Muhammad Ali black, by that Du Bois and Robeson black, by that Toni Morrison black, by that Angela Davis black, that Huey P. Newton black, that Malcolm X black, that John Carlos, Tommy Smith, and Colin Kaepernick black, by that straight ghetto black, by that self-loving black, by that slaves that fought back black, by that y'all can kiss my butt black. We're not living in the politically correct right now. We're not driving on the safe side of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This ain't about humility and assimilation. This ain't about wholesale incarceration. This ain't about making folks feel comfortable. We're not claiming that people of color posturing. We stepping into the danger waters. We talking by black, for black, be black, black music, unadulterated, black literature, unexpurgated, black art, uneviscerated, black love, unemasculated, black thought, uneradicated. Love me some Diane Carroll, but this ain't the Julia season. Love me some Claire Huxtable, but this ain't the Cosby Show season. Love me some Johnny Mathis, but this ain't the wonderful, wonderful season. Love me some Tiger Woods, but this ain't no country club season. Love me some Ray Charles, but this ain't no America the Beautiful season. Love me some Paul Lawrence Dunbar, but this ain't no cabin and field season. The worst of your kind has got it in for the best of our kind, for our women, for our children, for our legacy, for our history, for our accomplishments, for our neighborhoods and our villages and our faith. You can grudgingly admire the superstars, the prize winners, the great entertainers, the champions and the high achievers, the big earners and the brand names, until that unforgivable blackness rears its ugly head. Then hate drowns out the love for Oprah, for LeBron, for Spike, for Denzel, for Jim Brown, for Serena and Venus, for Chuck D and Tupac, for Barack and Michelle, for Marvin Gaye and MLK. You want to ban real blackness, real black books, real black heroes, real black role models, real black warriors, real black kings, and real black queens, trying to bury us without realizing that all you're doing is planting seeds. And like the main ingredient saying back in the day, listen to the drums tell, black seeds keep on growing. Critical race theory explains it well. Black seeds keep on growing. You shrug your shoulders and scream, what the hell? Black seeds keep on growing. Pavlov would instruct you, just listen to the bell. Black seeds keep on growing. Okay, so let's see. Change up, change up, change up. So as I said, during our discussion, Noel, a lot of, what we write about is obviously from the fount of our own experience. We're always trying to be better, you and I in particular, because, we know Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. We're always trying to be better men in Christ. And that's the genesis of this next poem I'm going to read. It's called A Letter to the Man I Used to Be. I was once afraid of my own shadow, timid, hesitant, easily shook. They say that pressure bursts pipes. My spiritual plumbing was shot. My mental mechanics needed overhauling. My soul's electrical wiring was shorting out. My works closet didn't have a prayer. You're looking at me with a mixed countenance of surprise and bewilderment, almost as if you've forgotten the way things used to be. Preacher says he gives the same message over and over again because he knows the saints leak. He must be right, because you ought to remember the not so good days, the not so great nights, the fraught weeks and the flunky years. You just ought to remember. Still, if a brother stays at the table long enough, he might get dealt a winning hand or two. The acne and the awkwardness didn't last. Confidence came on me fast. Some pretty girls forgot my past. The swagger made this bust a blast. Yes, I'm checking you out, the sisters might say. He got it going on. Big job, big house, big money, fly whip, boat slip, and a honey on his hip at all times. He may not be Mr. Right, but he darn sure is Mr. Right now. I went in on the weekend, popping bub at the club, getting play right away, Thursday night thrills, Friday night lights, and Saturday night fever. No remorse, no regrets. Hell, I don't even remember most of it. Almost got tagged with some baby mama drama, some Billie Jean junk. Sister tried to float some bunk, but surprisingly, at least to me, the real Pop showed up and showed proof the kid was not my son. Still, it's not the stuff of poetry. And I'm writing this letter so you can see. I wasn't the man God called me to be. I was the joker and the jerk. I tried to be woke without the work, not the purpose, just the perk. Most of the duty I'd sooner shirk. Still, if a brother gets up from the table to stretch, he might get a sense that he's been just a wretch. He might see a roughed out sketch. Amazing grace might let him catch all the bad apples in his batch. Skin deep beauties never match, just gold diggers trying to latch onto the man I used to be. Now that I have the revelation, I want to reveal my whole situation. I want to pass on this explanation and enter into the new creation God has put in play for me. So if you're reading this sinner's letter, please know that I want to do better, to release my bonds and soul unfettered as a new kind of faith-filled true trendsetter, not the old man who become in a better, now the lender who's no longer a debtor. Yes, if you've gotten this heartfelt note, know that I'm putting on Joseph's coat, embracing this life of many hues, shedding my layers of sin and blues, declaring intentions to let God use a life that I surely tried to abuse and one that I easily stood to lose. This is a letter to the man I used to be. The brother writing is the one God set free. Yet I have no delusion about my soul's infirmity, a work in progress. That's all I'll ever claim to be. Okay, all right. So thank you. So I write, as I said, I write a lot about, my home community. It's called West Medford, Massachusetts. It's a historically African-American community in the heart of a city that's still fairly white, with pockets of ethnicity, in different places. But West Medford was the tradition, going back to just after the Civil War, going back to the place, was the place where Black folks came to create neighborhood. And at first, there were only 3 streets that Blacks could even live on because of redlining to keep them out of other areas of Medford. And like many other African-American communities, it's being gentrified because the land and the location and everything about it is very, very desirable to people with, some coin and, people that want to do it different. So this is a piece called Mystic River Melancholy that talks about, the creep of gentrification into that historically African-American neighborhood. The freshly coiffed boho boys make real estate videos extolling the finer virtues of West Medford and life along the Mystic River. Maybe they're new money kids or Tufts grads that don't know the rich history of the village. They do have a sense that this is a minor mecca for ex-city dwellers, flush with IPO cash, NFT windfalls, or Bitcoin early adoptions. A new gentry that wants to be landed for their dogs and their Range Rovers and their wine tastings and the next generation of trust fund babies. The would-be property princes have a target market. The YouTube appeal is slick and shiny, classic Americana with a side of sushi or a venti mocha latte. They have no idea of what used to be. They know what the next wave wants to see. They want to see the bikes, the hikes, and their kids on trikes. They want to post pics that get lots of likes. They want to see the flowering trees and the birds and the bees. Their high-rise havens had none of these. They want to see if they can grow something green in a backyard garden beyond the green that's growing in their bulging bank accounts. Designer overalls and Doc Martens do not a farmer make. No worries. Whole Foods has gone 100% organic with a great selection of finely curated herbs and spices. I know that this sounds like resentment. Resignation frequently does. But when the private boat clubs bookend the public beach and the abutters don't want loud, unruly Dominicans descending on their hillsides for beachfront parking, well, what's a brother from the Ville to think? My daddy taught me how to fish here. Not much more than eels and sunfish in the water then, but it felt like legacy and we were happy to have it. They didn't really want us at their beach back then anyways, but we were mighty in our minority. We didn't want to fight folks, but the lake wasn't exactly pristine, so why begrudge it to anyone? We could walk that half mile or ride our Stingray bikes down there and feel connected to the small waves in the gentle wake. We could wonder about the kayakers and the canoe paddlers, the colorful sunfishers, occasional scullers, and the ubiquitous motorboaters. We could dream a little dream about owning a dinghy and a trawling engine and making a few waves of our own. Don't get me wrong. I love the new fish ladders and the intrepid herring counters, the trout infusion, the bald eagle sightings, and the focus on environmental sustainability. Thing is, they love it too, and they can pay for it. 1.4 mil for Queen Dorothy Elizabeth Tucker's old homestead. It should have been a historical landmark. Instead, it's yet another preview of coming attractions. Meanwhile, the sleepy little Nubian hamlet has released its black and brown patina to the inexorable tug of real estate values and the dying off of the old guard. Mine is the last generation that knew about the three streets, Arlington, Lincoln, and Jerome, that knew about the little store, the old Shiloh Baptist, and the library in the fire station. Mine is the last generation that knew about Charlie Booker and the Boston Bruins, the five Phillips brothers, Uncle Buddy's Postal Command, Doc Counsel's Blue Books, Farsini and Evelyn's Salon, and exactly why it's called Duggar Park. So many firsts, so much history, so little time to savor and to save, to preserve and to pass on. So many departures and so few arrivals of the black and the brown and the tan. Meanwhile, the developers mostly have their way. The Spanish day laborers tear it down and build it back up. Like Lee Majors in the $6 Million Man, they have the technology. They can make them better than they were. Better, stronger, faster. Condos and townhouses, Tony and trendy, out with the old, in with the new, wash, rinse, and repeat. Meanwhile, the freshly coiffed boho boys make real estate videos extolling the finer virtues of West Memphis and life along the Mystic River. So, no, do you want me to read one more?
Yes, definitely. You got time for one more.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna this piece is really kind of the whole raison d'etre for my for why I write poetry, and it's called "I Came for the Stories." I came for the stories of how you built this place, from the entrails and the dregs, from the unwashed and the unwanted. The only piece of the city they'd let you have, but you built it with pine and pegs and poles and persistence, with the beauty of duty and the substance of faith. I came for the story of the heroes, of the unheralded, of the legacy makers and the territory takers and the boundary shakers and the barrier breakers. The first ones to do the big thing, the bold thing, the forbidden, the unfamiliar, the courageous thing. I came for the stories, the ones you save for your children and their children and their children. Anansi stories, Shaka Zulu stories, Sheba stories, Hannibal stories, Toussaint stories, Sojourner stories, Malcolm, Marcus, Martin, and Medgar stories. Epic, heroic, and tragic truth of how we came over and what we've overcome. I came for the stories, all of them, lost, stolen, or strayed, because history can't be real for me, can't reveal to me, can't appeal to me without showing the black and the brown and the tan. Whitewashing so clearly all critical race theory just tells me we're nearly erasing a past we will pay for dearly. I came for the stories only poets can tell, magical tales that cast a spell, living water from the griot's well, distant drumming and a faraway bell, the seas reply in a queen conch shell, the salted air as the billows swell, an archangel triumphs, a demon fell, giants flee from where Davids dwell, lest they drown in a deepening stell, legion is vanquished and sent back to hell, the riot ends with a mournful yell, the old is recorded from district to death. I came for the story. And I will not leave, as I am beseeching beyond my own reaching for all you are teaching. The sermons you're preaching, where black knows no bleaching, of the borders we're breaching, as hatred is leaching and rage is screeching for love's impeaching. I came for the stories. I came for the stories. I came for the stories. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, those were poetry selections from Terry E. Carter. As always, Terry, phenomenal poetry. I truly enjoyed your work, and I'm quite sure our audience has as well. Thank you so much for sharing tonight.
My pleasure, absolutely. Always a pleasure sitting down to talk with you, Noel. You're inspiring a lot of poets out here, with what you do, with the conversations that you're having, and with the way that you're promoting and building up the poetry community.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So we got some time left. I'm going to shift gears again, because at this time, what we're going to do is just have a brief Q&A before we close out. And one of the things I want to touch on at this time is I want to ask you in regards to your faith. Now, to my understanding, you're born again, correct? Born again,
Yeah.
washed believer in Jesus
Most
Christ.
definitely.
Amen. Amen. In terms of your poetry, has there any have you had any instances when you're writing your poetry that you felt God leading you to write on certain subjects?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like this piece I was telling you about, and it was too long to really deal with this evening. But this piece called Evangelical Fraud. I mean, I heard God's voice say, "Listen, you got to expose some of this craziness that's going out here, in the kingdom. There's a lot of people out here who's faking the funk. So I need for you to write about that." And then around the holidays, particularly Christmas and Easter. I'm almost always, feeling the urge to, to talk about, kind of the love of Christ in the world. And yeah, frequently, I hear that wee small voice that sits on your shoulder or leans over to you and says, if you write it, they'll come.
Right. Now it may not apply to all of your poetry, but how important is it to you that your faith is represented in the poetry that you do write, wherever it is applicable?
There's never going to be a book I write, a book of poetry that doesn't have faith-driven poetry in it. And it may not be the lion's share, because this thing is all a question of, divine inspiration. In a lot of cases, that's not really where your mind, your heart, and your head is taking you, and you're more inspired in some instances by the jazz of it, by the history of it, by the, by dealing with the social justice of it, you're by family, by neighborhood, by all these other contexts. But it almost always eventually is going to come back to faith. And it's going to provoke you to, to say some things about the relationship that you have with the Lord Jesus Christ, and how you feel, without judging that people should be embracing their own faith.
Right, absolutely. And how important is it to you to make sure that you're representing your faith, especially when you're talking about other subjects like issues pertaining to the church, social justice matters,
Yeah.
all of those subject matters, intersect in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Like how important is it to you that when you're sharing your poetry, that that you're representing your faith and addressing those subjects, not just addressing them, but addressing them in the light of God's truth?
Yeah. It's very important. And one of the things that I hope people will notice is with the exception of a word that's used in context because it's the only word that applies, you're not going to find profanity. You're not going to find overtly sexual conversations. You're not going to find gossipy, backbiting, crabs in a barrel kind of stuff for me, because that's not the God, the order of the God I serve.
Right.
So, what you're going to find, I hope, is me talking about restoring godly order, kind of restoring, you know, um, strong faith, and enjoying with like-minded, um, saints to extol the finer virtues of serving the God we serve.
Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, taking all of your work up to this point into consideration, what would you hope to accomplish with through your writing?
Like I said, I mean, when I started writing, part of my mission was to um to represent, the community that I came from, in an honorable way. So I still want to do that very much. I still want to represent where I came from in a very honorable way, and to tell that particular story along with the other stories, that hopefully come out of kind of the fount of my own experience, but also out of witnessing all the things that we witness, um, in the way that we witness them as people of Christ. So I think that it's all interconnected, it's all interwoven, but I also want to be able to to dabble in the things that are pleasurable to me, without being profane or overtly
Right.
sexual. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about art. I want to talk about relationships, but I want to do it in a way that's honorable and shows dignity.
Mm.
I'm at that age where respect and dignity are extremely important to me, and not in the way that they're important to, like, respect in particular, to young brothers don't even really understand the concept, but feel like if you disrespect me, I'm gonna have to shoot you.
Right.
I'm not, that's not the kind of respect that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of respect that's earned because your walk is humble and graceful, and dignified in the eyes of God. That's worthy of being respected even more so than you flossing and got all this money and driving all these fancy whips and everything, and you feel like you need to be respected because you's a baller.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
baller, so and if you don't, then I'm a gangster and a thug. So and I'm not mad at hip hop. I'm not mad at rap. Hail 50 years of existence, and a lot of wonderful music that much of which I like to listen to, but I'm old school because the stuff that's going on now is just too profane and too illiterate, not literate enough, not illiterate, but not literate enough for my liking. So,
Right.
but a lot of skill. Don't get me wrong, a lot of bars for days. But I want to take it to a place. I'm KRS-One. If I
Mhm.
had a persona, a hip hop persona, it would be more KRS-One than it would be 50 Cent.
Right. Right. Definitely. Definitely. So, and is it safe to say that your aim is to leave a legacy of respect, a legacy of dignity, a legacy of substance?
I can't say it any better, Neil. Noel. I
Mhm.
can't say it any better. Definitely.
Absolutely. That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, you mentioned the upcoming CD project. Do
Yeah.
you have any other projects or events that you would like to share with our audience before we close out?
Um, Actually, I'm really trying to, have a little bit of a break. I know that I'll be busy in January because of, Martin Luther King month. I mean, Martin Luther King's birthday. And I know I'll be busy in February because of Black History Month. So I'm trying to, like, kind of slow things down a little bit so I can enjoy the holidays with my family, and not be running. Because I have been running a lot, and I feel like it's time to chill a bit. I mean, I have a few days all to myself. My wife is in South Africa right now on a missions trip.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
So I got a little time to myself, and I'm just trying to chill, just trying to take it easy a little bit. I gotta work, but you know, when I come home, I can vegetate a little bit, you know.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Downtime is always essential for a
Yes.
creative.
Yeah. Self-care, man. Self-care for
Absolutely.
sure.
That's absolutely essential. Well, with that, before we close out, there's one more thing that I want to do. And that is to say thank you. First and foremost, Terry E. Carter, ladies and gentlemen, he just shared some phenomenal poetry. As always a pleasure, Terry, to connect with you and to converse with you. Congratulations on your latest project. And, I wish you all the best with future endeavors. Very awesome poetry shared tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I've noticed that Hilda Felix has been on this call. She's
Yeah.
someone who I admire in terms of all the work that she's doing in the poetic community in New York. And so I would like just to extend an invitation to her. Like, if you're ever looking for a brother like me, I'm available.
That's actually my mom. She's my biggest supporter.
No, seriously?
Yeah. She's not a
Oh.
poet though. She's just a big supporter of my art. And
Okay. You know, maybe I'm confused. Maybe I'm confusing her with somebody else.
well, you never know. It's a small world,
It is a small world, but
and it's a common name. It is a common name.
let me extend to her congratulations on your success and on the model citizen you've shown yourself to be over the few years that I've known you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, she's always been my biggest supporter.
Hey,
Yeah,
nothing like a mother's love.
Exactly. She introduced me to books. She started reading from me at the age of 2. So if not for her, I wouldn't be where I am right now. So I thank God for her every single day.
Beautiful thing. It
The
really is a
tremendous
beautiful
blessing.
thing. Congratulations.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for your support of the PWP Sessions podcast. I will be on hiatus for the holidays, and I will see you all in 2024. You have made 2023 a phenomenal year for me, and I just want to say thank you to all of my guests and all of my supporters of the PWP Sessions podcast. Your support and your encouragement and your prayers are very, very much appreciated. For more information about Poets with Purpose and the PWP Sessions, you can call me at 646-372-6230 or email me at poetswithpurpose@gmail.com. All of my logos and flyers were designed by the excellent team at Eclipse Graphics. You can find them on Instagram at Eclipse Graphics NY to connect with them for any projects you may have. And lastly, for those of you that wish to make a donation, you can do so through PayPal, Tap Media Man, $ Anointed Pen through Cash App, or through Zelle, utilizing my phone number. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for episode 10 in season 3 of the PWP Sessions podcast. This episode will be uploaded to the Poets with Purpose YouTube channel within the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for that, for you to share on your on all of your social media channels and email contacts. Terry, thank you again. A pleasure as always.
My pleasure too.
Hope to connect with you soon. Have a good night, everyone, and God
All right,
bless.
brother.
Thank you.
Good evening.